Welcome to Cook with Joy. Hi, I'm Joy Kelly, and this is my cooking show. I hope it's becoming your cooking show. I hope it's your favorite cooking show because it's my favorite cooking show. Today, I want to talk about soup. Soup is such an important part of your diet, I cannot even tell you. One of the reasons we make bad food choices is because we're hungry, and our brain is triggered to look for the most high caloric food that we can, the most fat dense, the most just not food that you should eat when you get hungry. So one of the best recommendations I ever got from a doctor was that you should always have soup around, and you should keep it like in a crock pot or an Instant Pot, and just all day long you've just got a little thing of soup and you can just scoop it up. There are so many recipes for soup that it's crazy. One of my favorite things to do is to make what I call stone soup. And basically, it's the story of the soldiers that were, coming through Europe after it was war-torn, and there was no food to be found. And they would go from village to village, and when they would go through the villages, the villagers they'd close their shutters and pretend that they weren't there because they didn't have any food to spare, especially not with strangers just passing through town. So these soldiers would do this little ploy, and they would get a big pot and fill it with water and make a fire in the middle of whatever town square there was. And they would bring up stones from the river, and when people would ask them, what they were doing, they'd say, well, we're making stone soup. People would say, that's ridiculous. And they said, no, it's really great sustenance. And so then the soldiers would start talking between each other, and they'd say, but remember when we were in that one town and they had some onion, and we added that to it, and it was so much better. And one of the little townspeople would go to their cellar and bring out a little bit of onion and add it to the soup. And one by one, people would come out of their houses with little bits of things to add to the soup until they had made this huge cauldron of soup, and everybody got to eat, and it was just this magical time. And that's how I think of soup. I think of the stone soup recipe. So normally if I'm going to make stone soup, I look to see what I have in my refrigerator that might possibly go bad. It's not going to be as fresh as it, because you want to use fresh ingredients. So I don't want anything that's turning, but I want to look at something that might turn if I don't use it right now. And I also like to read cooking recipes, other recipes by other chefs, little simple things that you can do. I'm going to share a couple of those today. One of them is by Joel Fuhrman, and if you don't know who Joel Fuhrman is, you got to look him up. He's got a great book called Eat to Live, and he has tons of soup recipes, but they're all kind of based on that stone soup idea. So he has a soup recipe that doesn't require any liquid, which I think is crazy, and today we're going to make it for the first time. Great, so we're going to use a couple of different things today. We're going to use cauliflower. We're just going to cut off all the green parts. And what's neat about this soup is that you don't have to add any liquid, and you also don't have to add it and then prep it. It's a Mediterranean dish. He calls it a Mediterranean stew. So we're going to break up all of the cauliflower, and we're going to add that. And I think it's going to be more like a casserole is my understanding. You could do it in the oven, or you could do it on the stovetop, which is how we're going to do it today. But I'm just going to break all of the cauliflower up. And Derek doesn't like cauliflower, and that's probably what's wrong with Derek, because cauliflower is really super good for you.
That's one of the things that's wrong with me.
It's a cancer-fighting agent. All of the cruciferous vegetables are. And you can do a lot of fun things. I know that buffalo cauliflower is really popular. We were talking about that earlier. And I'm not so much a fan. And I can't say that I use cauliflower a ton, but I do like to use it to thicken things up. I think it's very good for that. And I do like it when someone cooks it for me. And you know how I really used to like it? Guess. I liked it with cheese sauce all over it. I bet you'd like it with cheese sauce, wouldn't you?
Probably.
Yeah, anything with cheese sauce. So we're just cutting the cauliflower up, not real small, just in kind of a little bit, you might want to take 2 bites out of it when you put it in, but it's going to get really tender, and that's going to be the exciting part. And then we're going to add some edamame beans, and these are shelled soybeans. Really, really good for you. These are not processed. Soy is excellent for many, many reasons. The isoflavones in it are cancer fighting. A lot of people don't want to eat soy these days, and that's because of how it's processed. So when you can get soy that's minimally processed, like edamame, this is all it is a shelled bean. Really, really good. Oh, no, that's great for you. You probably only have this when you go to a bar and they put the dried ones in front of you. And they're still good for you, but they're not as good for you as a shelled soybean. So I love that we're using that. And then we're going to use, once again, red pepper. Take the seeds out and the stems, and we're just going to cut them up into kind of little chunks. Everything in here is going to be kind of chunky. I'm excited to see how this turns out because, like I said, I've never had it before. It's going to be magnificent. You know, you really can't go wrong. It's not like meats. You know, when you're cooking with meat, you can really screw it up. You can overcook it, you can undercook it, you can let it get rotten. Vegetables, like as long as they're fresh looking and they're bright in color, they're going to be great. We're going to put a tomato in here, and the tomato is what's going to add the juice. So not only are you going to get all the health benefits of having a tomato, you're going to not have to use any liquid because you're using the tomato. And I like heirloom tomatoes, and I like tomatoes that I grow. These are tomatoes on the vine, so they're a little bit different than the heirlooms. And this time of year, it's a little bit tough to find heirlooms, but I think that it's going to work out just fine anyway. So we've got a tomato, and then we're going to add some mushrooms because I like to use mushrooms in everything. I just think they're the best thing. I love the texture. I love that they add kind of a meaty texture to things. I love the benefits, the health benefits, the vitamin D. You know, once you hit 40, if you're a woman, you are not converting sunlight to vitamin D the way you did when you were younger. And I didn't know that because I get a lot of sun, but I had my vitamin D levels checked when I was in my 40s. And I was just shocked to know that they were low. So I've been doing things like adding more mushrooms to my diet. So I can't think of many dishes that mushrooms aren't delicious in. Some people don't like mushrooms, and you know, I don't know what that's about. When you have an aversion to a certain food that's good for you, I'm not sure if you've got something going on with your immune system or if it's just preferential taste. I don't know.
Those people are crazy.
Those people are crazy. We're going to add a little bit of cumin, that Mediterranean taste, and you see how precisely I'm measuring that. And we're going to add a little bit of cinnamon. Once again, precisely measured. Gives it that nice Mediterranean flavor. And then we're going to add some currants.
What are currants?
Currants are just like raisins, but they're tinier. They're made from a berry. They have red currants, and they grow on a bush just like any berry would. Let's add a little more cumin. And now we're going to put this on the stove, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope it works while I show you another soup recipe. Okay, that is on, and I really hope that works. This is the first time I've tried that recipe. This next recipe is really fascinating to me, and I found this online just kind of looking around. It's a super, super, super simple soup recipe.
I like how you did that.
Super, 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 super soup. It calls for a can of organic pumpkin. Now, don't get the kind of pumpkin that you put in a pie. I mean, you could put it in a pie, but don't get the one that has like cinnamon and sugar and all that stuff in it. You just want plain pumpkin, which is awesome. And then this is crazy. The next thing that it calls for is this sun nut butter. And this is made from sunflower seeds. Now, I've told you before on my Thanksgiving shows, I told you how good pumpkin is. It's actually the highest vegetable that there is in beta carotene. It's awesome.
I think I told you that.
Maybe, but I think that I probably looked it up after you told me that. So I think maybe you were like doing some fact checking for me. This is sunflower butter, and I've never used this before, but you're supposed to use a half a cup of this, and I don't have a little half a cup, so I'm just going to guess about a half a cup. I mean, how can you screw up nut butter, you know? So it's about a half a cup that we're going to add there, and I'm going to mix that into the pumpkin. And then the next thing that it calls for is 3 cups of broth. We could use a little veggie broth, but I'm also going to try some of this vegetarian no chicken broth that tastes like chicken, and I think it would be a really nice addition because this woman actually, in her recipe, called for chicken broth, but of course I'm not going to use chicken broth, but I could use no chicken broth. And this is 2 cups, so we're going to have to use a cup of the veggie broth too. Now, here's a little factoid. When you add liquid to something that is like a paste, if you don't get that paste in a slurry first, like whenever you go out for wasabi, if you go out for vegetarian sushi and you try to make wasabi with soy sauce, have you ever noticed how if you put like a ton of soy sauce in, you never get the clumps of the wasabi mixed up? But if you add a little bit of soy sauce into the wasabi and you get a little slurry going, like this, then you can add a little bit more, and it gets to be exactly the right consistency. Now, this is all this soup calls for. And like I said, I have not tried this, and it's kind of risky for me to be doing shows like this that I haven't even tried the recipe, but that's kind of fun too, I think. So let's add that all, and we'll need 1 more cup of the veggie broth. And sunflower seeds, all seeds are so good for you. The different kinds of fats that they each have in them. And I don't eat sunflower seeds very much. When I was a kid, I did. We'd get them in the shell, and that was the big thing. We'd spit them out underneath the bleachers at school, and the janitor would get all mad at us. But that's about the only time in my life that I ever had sunflower seeds. And I think really what I liked was sucking the salt off the shells. Didn't even care if I really, if I really actually got to the actual sunflower. So this is kind of fun to be trying something new and good for me at the same time. So we've got another cup of the veggie broth. We're going to stir that up. And I just can't believe how simple this is. So we're going to put it on the oven. Now I thought about putting kale in it, and that's why I've got the kale out, because I like to put kale in a lot of things. But I want to try it because I've never done this recipe before. Let's try it just the way that the woman said, and we'll see what we think about it. Here we go. Okay, so this was an interesting experiment, and you're going to find that is going to be true for you too, because even if you follow my recipe, it's not necessarily going to be the way that you like it. Now, I might have not measured the broth as closely as I should have.
No.
I might have gotten in too much broth because Derek tasted it and he didn't think it tasted like much of pumpkin and much of the sun butter. So I added a little more sun butter, and that was better. I wish I had more pumpkin. I'd add more of that. I think when I make this the next time, I'm going to cook it and add the broth to taste, and you might want to try that as well. So I've seen other pumpkin soup recipes, and I'm going to try some of those. One thing that you might try with this soup is thickening it up with some cashews. So if you take cashews and soak them and then put them into a Vitamix, you can really grind them into a paste. You'd want to add the soup to it, and it would get a lot thicker than it is. So the jury's out on whether or not I love this soup. Lots of good things in it for you. I'd love to know what happens when you try it. If you try it, maybe after this, it's kind of like me saying, this is terrible, will you try it? It's not terrible. It's not terrible, it's just not fabulous. And I like everything that I make to be fabulous. So it sounded too good to be true, and it kind of was too good to be true. But let's look at this dish. I put it in a bigger pot so I could get it to stir a little bit better. And I can't believe this. You don't need any liquid. I mean, like all of these vegetables are getting liquidy. It really is turning into a stew. It's going to need to cook for a little while longer, but we're going to have this for dinner tonight. And the combination of the cinnamon and the cumin with all of the vegetables, it's really just, it smells out of this world. Even Derek, you even like the smell of it.
Smells like the Mediterranean.
That's what it is. I think it's going to be delicious. I encourage you to try these recipes, first of all. But second of all, I encourage you to try my stone soup approach towards making soup. And I also recommend that you keep some soup on hand if you're someone who struggles with reaching for the wrong thing during the day, or if you struggle. Here's another thing that I struggled with before I started eating a plant-based diet. I struggled with getting, how do you get enough vegetables in my life? And making soup is a really, really, really good way to do that. So I recommend that you find some soup recipes that you really like, play around with seasonings, try these out. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you come up with something better. I love this idea that I can make this stew without adding any liquid at all. I think that's crazy. But really, let me know what you think. And by all means, please stay tuned for next week's episode of Cook with Joy, your favorite cooking show.